You know that feeling when you're lying awake at 3 in the morning and suddenly your entire life feels like a costume you've been wearing for so long you forgot it wasn't your actual skin. That specific moment when the bills are paid, the responsibilities are met, everyone thinks you're doing fine, but there's this screaming silence inside you that gets louder every single day. You've built this whole identity, this whole version of yourself that checks all the boxes, that says the right things, that shows up where you're supposed to show up, but somewhere deep in your chest there's this growing awareness that none of it is actually you. It's terrifying because you can't quite name what's wrong. Nothing catastrophic has happened. You haven't failed in any obvious way. But there's this unbearable heaviness, this sense that you're living someone else's life. And the worst part is, you can't remember when you agreed to it. This isn't about fixing something broken. This is about something far more profound and far more disturbing. You're standing at the edge of a death that no one talks about, the death that happens while you're still breathing, and there's a truth waiting for you there that will change absolutely everything. But you can only see it once, right before your old self dies, and most people spend their entire lives running from this exact moment. What Jung discovered is that there's a specific point in every person's psychological development where the persona, that carefully constructed social mask you've been wearing, starts to crack under its own weight. And this isn't a breakdown, it's actually a breakthrough disguised as devastation. You've spent decades building this version of yourself based on what your parents needed you to be, what society rewarded, what kept you safe, what made you acceptable. And now that structure is collapsing, not because you're weak, but because your soul is finally strong enough to demand something real. The truth you're about to see is so simple, it's almost offensive. You are not who you think you are. That person you've been defending, protecting, maintaining, improving, that's not you, that's a survival mechanism. And it served its purpose. But now it's become a prison, and the bars are made of your own beliefs about who you're supposed to be. Right now, in this exact moment of your life, you're being called to die, not physically, but psychologically, to let go of every single story you've told yourself about who you are. And this is the most terrifying invitation you'll ever receive, because the person you've been is the only person you know how to be. Here's what nobody tells you about transformation. It doesn't start with inspiration or motivation or some beautiful moment of clarity. It starts with unbearable discomfort. It starts with the growing awareness that the life you're living is killing something essential inside you. You wake up one day and realize you've been performing your own life instead of living it. Every conversation feels scripted. Every decision feels predetermined. You're moving through your days like an actor who's forgotten they're in a play, and suddenly you can see the stage, you can see the lights, you can see the audience, and you can't unsee it. This is what Jung called the confrontation with the shadow, but it's deeper than that. This is the moment when your soul starts whispering and then shouting that everything you've built your identity on is fundamentally false. Not because you're a liar, but because you've been living from a place of adaptation rather than authenticity. The old self, the one that got you here, the one that kept you safe, the one that earned approval, that self has to die, and it will fight for its survival with everything it has, because to that self, this death feels absolutely real. You've probably noticed that the things that used to work don't work anymore. The coping mechanisms that got you through your 20s feel hollow now. The relationships that used to feel sufficient feel suffocating. The career that used to give you purpose feels like slow suicide. The beliefs that used to comfort you feel like lies you're telling yourself to get through another day. This isn't depression, although it might look like it from the outside. This is what happens when your psyche outgrows the container you've built for it. Your soul is too big for the life you're living, and something has to give, and what has to give is the false self, the adapted self, the self that was never really you to begin with. Jung said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, But he didn't mention that the price of that privilege is the complete destruction of who you thought you were. You're standing in the doorway between two versions of yourself, and you can't move forward until you're willing to let the old version die. And this death is so complete, so total, that it feels like annihilation. The truth you only see once is this: everything you've been afraid of losing was never yours to begin with. That identity you've been clinging to, it's a ghost. That version of yourself you've been trying to fix and improve and perfect, it's a character in a story you didn't write. You've been so busy maintaining this false self that you haven't noticed the real you has been buried alive underneath layers and layers of conditioning, trauma, adaptation, and fear. Right before your old self dies, there's this moment of absolute clarity where you can see the entire architecture of your psychological imprisonment, and it's built from your own hands. Every limiting belief, every fear, every story about what's possible for you, it's all been constructed by a part of you that was trying to keep you safe but ended up keeping you small. And the devastating truth is that no one did this to you. You did it to yourself because you didn't know any other way to survive. You built a cage and called it a life, and now you're finally awake enough to see the bars. This is where most people turn back. This moment right here, when you can see the truth but before you've acted on it, this is where the terror becomes unbearable. Because if you're not who you thought you were, then who are you? If everything you've built your life on is false, then what's real? If you let go of this identity, what's left? These questions feel like death, because to the ego, to that constructed self, they are death. But here's what's hidden in this darkness. You can't lose what you never were. The only thing that dies is the illusion, and what's born is the truth. But you have to be willing to stand in that void, that terrifying space between who you were and who you're becoming, and trust that something real is waiting for you there. Jung called this the dark night of the soul, but it's more accurate to call it the death of the false self. And it's the most important death you'll ever experience because it's the only death that leads to real life. What makes this moment so uniquely devastating is that you can feel both versions of yourself existing simultaneously. There's the you that everyone knows, the you that shows up to work, the you that maintains relationships, the you that pays bills and makes small talk and pretends everything is fine. And then there's this other you, this stranger inside your own skin, this presence that's been growing stronger and louder and more insistent, demanding to be seen, demanding to be heard, demanding to be lived. And these two versions of you cannot coexist. One of them has to die. And the terrifying part is that you've invested everything in the wrong one. You've built your entire life around the false self, the adapted self, the self that knows how to survive but has forgotten how to live. And now you're being asked to betray that self, to turn your back on everything you've worked for, everything you've built, everything you've become, and trust that something truer is waiting for you in the darkness. Think about how much energy you've spent maintaining this false version of yourself. Think about all the times you've bitten your tongue when you wanted to speak your truth. Think about all the times you've smiled when you wanted to scream. Think about all the times you've said yes when everything in you was screaming no. Think about all the times you've molded yourself into whatever shape the situation required, whatever version of you would be most acceptable, most lovable, most safe. You've been doing this for so long that you don't even notice it anymore. It's become automatic, unconscious, the way you breathe without thinking about breathing. But your soul notices. Your soul is keeping track of every betrayal, every compromise, every moment you chose safety over truth, and now the bill is coming due. And the payment is nothing less than the complete death of the person you've been pretending to be. Jung talked about individuation, this process of becoming who you truly are. But what he really meant is that you have to be willing to disappoint everyone. You have to be willing to let people down. You have to be willing to be misunderstood, to be criticized, to be rejected, to be abandoned, because the alternative is to abandon yourself. And that's a death that happens slowly, quietly, over decades, until one day you wake up and realize you've spent your entire life living for other people's approval, and you have no idea who you actually are. This is what's happening to you right now. You're waking up. And waking up means seeing all the ways you've been asleep, all the ways you've been complicit in your own imprisonment, all the ways you've chosen comfort over truth, and it's devastating because you can't unknow what you now know. You can't unsee what you've seen. The truth is out, and there's no going back, there's only going through. Here's the thing about this death that makes it so different from any other kind of suffering you've experienced. When you go through a breakup or lose a job or face some external crisis, there's still a you that's going through it. There's still a sense of self that remains intact, that can process the loss, that can eventually move on. But this death is different because what's dying is the very sense of self that would normally process the death. The you that would normally cope with this isn't going to survive this. That's what makes it so terrifying and so disorienting. You're losing your primary reference point for reality. You're losing the lens through which you've always seen the world. You're losing the story you've always told yourself about who you are and what your life means. And in that loss, in that complete dissolution of everything you thought was solid and real and true, there's this moment of absolute terror where you realize you have no idea what happens next. But here's what's hidden in that terror. Here's what you can only see once you're willing to stand in it rather than run from it. That sense of self that's dying, that identity you've been clinging to, it was never solid to begin with. It was always just a collection of thoughts, beliefs, memories, stories, all held together by fear and repetition and the desperate need to know who you are. And when that structure starts to crumble, when those stories start to fall apart, what you discover underneath is not nothing. It's everything. It's the part of you that existed before you learned to be afraid, before you learned to perform, before you learned to hide. It's the part of you that's connected to something infinite, something eternal, something that Jung called the self, with a capital S. The divine spark that's been buried under all those layers of conditioning and trauma and adaptation. This is why every spiritual tradition talks about death and rebirth. This is why Jesus said, "You must be born again." This is why the mystics talk about ego death. This is why the shamans talk about dismemberment and reassembly. They're all pointing to the same truth. You cannot become who you truly are until you're willing to completely let go of who you think you are. You cannot step into your divine nature until you're willing to release your human identity. You cannot live from your soul until you're willing to die to your ego. And this isn't metaphorical. This isn't symbolic. This is a real psychological death, and it requires real courage, real faith, real surrender, because you have to let go before you know what you're letting go into. Let me ask you something, and I want you to really sit with this question, because your answer might reveal something you've been avoiding. When was the last time you felt truly alive, not entertained, not distracted, not numbed out, but genuinely, vitally alive in your own skin? Can you even remember, or has it been so long that you've forgotten what that feels like? Most people can't answer this question because they've been living in survival mode for so long, they've mistaken it for life. You've been running on autopilot, checking boxes, meeting expectations, maintaining appearances, and somewhere along the way, you forgot that you're allowed to actually feel something real. So here's what I want you to do. In the comments below, I want you to share one thing, just one specific thing that you've been pretending is okay when it's actually killing you inside. It doesn't have to be profound or dramatic. It can be as simple as, I've been pretending I love my career when I actually dread Monday mornings. or I've been pretending I'm fine alone when I'm actually desperately lonely. Be specific, be honest, and use this exact phrase, I've been pretending that, and then finish the sentence with your truth. This isn't just for you. When you share your truth, you give someone else permission to see their own truth, and that's how transformation begins. Not in isolation, but in the honest acknowledgement of what's real. Drop your truth in the comments right now, and let's stop pretending together. Now here's where this gets even more interesting and more disturbing. The reason you can only see this truth once, right before your old self dies, is because your entire psychological system is designed to prevent you from seeing it. Your ego, that constructed sense of self, has one primary function: survival. And to the ego, this truth is lethal. So it creates elaborate defense mechanisms, stories, distractions, anything to keep you from waking up to the fact that you've been living a lie. It keeps you busy, it keeps you anxious, it keeps you focused on external problems, so you never turn inward and see what's really happening. It convinces you that the problem is out there: your job, your relationship, your body, your bank account. When the real problem is that you've abandoned yourself so completely you don't even know who you are anymore. This is why transformation is so rare. Not because it's difficult, but because it requires you to see through the very mechanism that's been protecting you, and that feels like suicide to the part of you that's been in control. Your ego has been running your life for so long that it believes it is you. It believes it's keeping you alive. It believes that if it lets go, if it stops controlling, if it stops defending and protecting and managing, you'll die. And in a way, it's right. If the ego lets go, it dies. But you don't die. The real you, the essential you, the you that existed before all the conditioning and trauma and fear, that you is eternal, indestructible, infinite, that you cannot die, that you is waiting patiently beneath all the noise and chaos and suffering, waiting for the moment when you're finally ready to stop identifying with the false self and remember who you truly are. But to get there, to access that truth, you have to be willing to let the ego die, and the ego will fight this with everything it has, because it genuinely believes it's fighting for your survival. This is why the spiritual path is often described as a battle or a war. It's not a battle against external forces or demons or evil. It's a battle against your own resistance to transformation. It's a battle against the part of you that would rather stay small and safe and known than risk the unknown territory of your own soul. It's a battle against every defense mechanism, every coping strategy, every story you've ever told yourself about who you are and what's possible for you. And this battle reaches its climax right here, right now, in this moment, when you can see the truth, but before you've surrendered to it, when you know the old self has to die, but you're still clinging to it with everything you have. When you understand intellectually what needs to happen, but emotionally you're terrified beyond words. Jung understood that the psyche speaks in symbols, and when you're on the verge of this death, your psyche will send you messages, vivid dreams that disturb you, physical symptoms that won't go away, synchronicities that feel too meaningful to ignore, obsessive thoughts about escape or change, a growing sense that time is running out. These aren't random. These are your soul trying to wake you up, trying to tell you that the life you're living is no longer aligned with who you truly are. But here's the trap. Most people respond to these symptoms by trying to fix the external circumstances. They change jobs, they end relationships, they move cities, they buy things, they start new projects, anything to relieve the pressure. But the pressure isn't coming from outside, it's coming from inside, from the widening gap between who you are and who you're pretending to be. You can't run from this, you can only go through it. And going through it means being willing to die to everything you thought you knew about yourself. The old self will bargain with you. It will offer compromises. It will say, maybe I just need a vacation, maybe I just need a new hobby. Maybe I just need to try harder, work harder, be better. But deep down, you know that's not it. Deep down, you know that what needs to die is something fundamental, something structural, the entire framework you've been operating from. This is what makes it so terrifying. You're not being asked to improve your life. You're being asked to destroy it and rebuild it from the ground up, from a completely different foundation. And you have no guarantee that what you build will be better or easier or more comfortable. The only guarantee is that it will be true. And for a soul that's been starving for truth, that has to be enough. What you're experiencing right now isn't a crisis. It's an initiation. In every spiritual tradition, there's this recognition that real transformation requires death and rebirth. The old you has to die so the true you can emerge. But we've lost the language for this in modern culture. We medicalize it, we pathologize it, we try to fix it and make it go away as quickly as possible, when what we should be doing is honoring it, holding space for it, recognizing it as the most sacred process a human being can go through. You're not broken. You're not failing. You're not falling apart. You're waking up, and waking up is painful because it means seeing all the ways you've been asleep, all the ways you've betrayed yourself, all the years you've spent living someone else's definition of your life. This pain isn't something to avoid. It's something to move through, because on the other side of it is a version of you that's so authentic, so aligned, so true that you won't recognize your old life when you look back at it. The truth you see right before your old self dies is that you've been living in service to fear instead of in service to love. Every decision you've made, every path you've chosen, every version of yourself you've presented to the world, it's all been filtered through this question. What's safe? What will keep me protected? What will keep me from being rejected, abandoned, criticized, hurt? And that question has shaped your entire life, and it's created a life that feels like a prison, because safety and truth are not the same thing. You can be completely safe and completely dead inside. You can have everything you thought you wanted and feel absolutely nothing. This is the lie the old self was built on, the belief that if you just played by the rules, if you just did what you were supposed to do, if you just became who you were supposed to become, you'd be okay. But you're not okay, you're suffocating. And the only way out is to start making decisions based on a different question. What's true? What's real? What makes me feel alive? This shift from fear to truth, from safety to authenticity, from survival to actually living, this is the death we're talking about. This is the death that happens right before your eyes open to a completely different way of being in the world. And it's terrifying because you've spent your entire life learning how to survive, how to adapt, how to fit in, how to be acceptable. And now you're being asked to unlearn all of that, to step into a way of being that has no rules, no guarantees, no safety net. You're being asked to trust yourself in a way you've never trusted yourself before. You're being asked to listen to your intuition, to follow your inner guidance, to honor your truth even when it makes no logical sense, even when everyone around you thinks you're crazy, even when you have no idea where it's leading you. And here's the paradox that will drive you mad if you let it. The only way to find yourself is to completely lose yourself. The only way to know who you truly are is to let go of every idea you've ever had about who you are. The only way to live is to die. This is what the mystics have been trying to tell us for thousands of years. But we keep trying to understand it intellectually, trying to figure it out, trying to control it, trying to manage it, when the whole point is to surrender, to let go, to stop trying, to allow the death to happen without resistance. But your ego can't do that. Your ego can't surrender. Your ego can't let go, because surrender for the ego is death. So the ego will keep fighting, keep resisting, keep trying to maintain control, until the moment when you, the real you, The awareness behind the ego makes a choice to stop identifying with it, to stop believing its stories, to stop letting it run your life. That choice, that moment of disidentification, that's when the death happens. Not gradually, not slowly, but all at once. It's like a switch flips, and suddenly you can see that everything you've been taking so seriously, all the drama, all the suffering, all the stories about who you are and what you need and what's wrong with you, all of it is just thoughts, just patterns, just conditioning, and none of it is actually you. The real you is the one watching the thoughts. The real you is the awareness that's always been here, unchanging, untouched by any of the chaos and pain and confusion. The real you is vast and spacious and free, and it's been here all along, waiting patiently for you to stop looking everywhere else and finally look within. This is the truth you only see once, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you recognize yourself as awareness rather than as the content of awareness, once you understand that you are not your thoughts or your emotions or your history or your identity, once you wake up to the fact that all of that is just happening within you, that you are the space in which it all arises and passes away, everything changes. Not externally, necessarily. Your circumstances might stay exactly the same. But internally, there's a freedom that wasn't there before, a peace that doesn't depend on anything being different than it is, a sense of being home in yourself that you've been searching for your entire life in all the wrong places. And if you've made it this far in this video, if you're still here, still listening, still recognizing yourself in these words, then do me a favor, hit that like button right now. Not because I need it, but because when you click that button, you're making a declaration to yourself that you're ready to stop running from this truth. You're acknowledging that something in you is ready to die, so something truer can be born. And while you're at it, subscribe to this channel, because this conversation, this deep dive into the psychology of transformation, this isn't a one-time thing. This is a journey we're on together, a community of people who are brave enough to look at the truth, brave enough to let the old self die, brave enough to become who we actually are. We're building something here, a space where it's safe to be real, where it's safe to be vulnerable, where it's safe to admit that you don't have it all figured out and you're scared and you're tired of pretending. So click that subscribe button and join us on this journey. Here's what happens after the death, after that moment of seeing through the illusion of the false self. There's a period of grief, real grief, because even though what died wasn't real, even though it was just a construction, just a story, you invested everything in it. You built your entire life around it. You made decisions based on it. You sacrificed your truth for it. And now it's gone. And there's this emptiness, this void where your identity used to be. And the temptation is to fill that void immediately, to construct a new identity, a better one, a more spiritual one, a more authentic one. But that would be missing the point entirely. The point is to learn to live in the void, to be comfortable with not knowing who you are, to rest in the spaciousness of pure being without any labels or stories or definitions. This is the hardest part for most people. We're so addicted to identity, so conditioned to define ourselves, that the idea of existing without a clear sense of self feels like annihilation. But it's not annihilation. It's liberation. It's freedom from the prison of self-concept. It's the ability to be fresh and new and spontaneous in every moment instead of being bound by the past, by the story of who you've been, by the limitations you've accepted as truth. When you let the old self die and you resist the urge to immediately create a new one, you discover something extraordinary. You can function perfectly well without a fixed sense of self. In fact, you function better. You're more present, more responsive, more alive, because you're not filtering everything through the lens of me and my story and what this means about who I am. Jung called this process individuation. But he also recognized that it never really ends. You don't arrive at some final version of yourself and then you're done. It's an ongoing process of death and rebirth, of letting go and discovering, of surrendering old patterns and opening to new possibilities. Each death takes you deeper into your truth, closer to your essence, more aligned with your soul. And each death is terrifying in its own way because you never quite know what's on the other side. But here's what you learn with each successive death. You can trust the process. You can trust that what's dying needs to die. You can trust that what's being born is more true, more real, more you than what came before. The truth you're seeing right now, in this moment as you watch this video and feel these words resonating in your chest, in your gut, in that place inside you that knows, the truth is your soul calling you home. It's calling you back to yourself, back to the person you were before the world told you who to be, back to the divine spark that's been covered over by layers and layers of conditioning and trauma and fear. And the only way to answer that call, the only way to come home, is to let the old self die. To stop defending it, stop justifying it, stop trying to fix it or improve it or make it work. To simply let it go and trust that what emerges in its place will be truer and more aligned with your purpose, with your path, with the reason your soul chose to be here in this lifetime. Because here's the ultimate truth, the one that puts everything else in perspective. You didn't come here to be safe. You didn't come here to be comfortable. You didn't come here to fit in or be liked or meet everyone's expectations. You came here to grow, to evolve, to become more conscious, to wake up to who you truly are. And that process requires death, multiple deaths, the death of every false identity, every limiting belief, every fear-based pattern that keeps you small and separate and suffering. Your soul knew this before you were born. Your soul chose this. Your soul signed up for this exact journey with all its pain and confusion and terror, because it knew that on the other side of each death is more life, more love, more truth, more of your divine nature expressed in human form. So when you feel like you're dying, when everything is falling apart, when nothing makes sense anymore and you can't see a way forward, remember this. Your soul is doing exactly what it came here to do. It's breaking you open so more light can get in. It's destroying the false so the true can emerge. It's killing the person you thought you were so the person you actually are can finally be born. And yes, it's terrifying. Yes, it's painful. Yes, it feels like the end of everything. But it's not the end, it's the beginning. It's the moment when your real life finally starts. It's the death that leads to life, the darkness that births the light, the descent into the underworld that prepares you for your ascension into your power, your truth, your purpose, your divine nature. You're standing at the threshold right now. You can feel it. That's why you're here watching this video, reading these words, feeling this resonance in your body. Some part of you knows that the old life is over, that the old self is dying, that nothing will ever be the same again. And yes, there's fear, but underneath the fear, if you're quiet enough, if you're still enough, if you're brave enough to really feel what's there, you'll notice something else. You'll notice relief. You'll notice a sense of rightness, of inevitability, of yes, this is what needs to happen, because you're so tired of pretending. You're so tired of performing. You're so tired of being someone you're not. And even though you don't know who you'll be once this death is complete, even though the future is completely uncertain, there's a part of you that's ready, that's willing, that's saying yes to the death so you can finally say yes to life, real life, your life, the one you came here to live. Here's the most important part. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't need to know who you'll be after this death. You don't need a plan or a strategy or a clear vision of the future. All you need is the willingness to let go, to stop clinging to the old version of yourself, to stop defending it and protecting it and trying to make it work. The moment you release your grip on who you think you're supposed to be, the moment you stop resisting this death, something shifts, not immediately, not dramatically, but there's a softening, a spaciousness, a sense that maybe, just maybe, you can survive this. And you can, you will, because what's dying isn't you. What's dying is the lie, what's dying is the mask, what's dying is the prison, and what's being born is the person you were always meant to be before the world got its hands on you and told you who to be instead. This is your initiation. This is your invitation. This is the death that leads to life. Stop fighting it. Stop running from it. Turn toward it. Face it. Let it happen. Because on the other side of this death is a freedom you can't even imagine right now. A life that's so aligned with your soul that every single day feels like a homecoming, a version of you that's so authentic and true that you'll wonder how you ever lived any other way. You deserve that. You've always deserved that, and it's waiting for you the moment you're brave enough to let the old you die. So take a breath. Feel the fear. Feel the grief. Feel the terror of not knowing what comes next. And then, when you're ready, when you can't hold on any longer, when the pain of staying the same finally exceeds the fear of changing, let go. Surrender. Die. And trust that what's on the other side of this death is everything your soul has been longing for since the moment you forgot who you truly are. This is the truth you only see once, right before your old self dies. Don't miss it. Don't run from it. Don't waste this sacred moment. This is your chance. This is your time. This is your death, and it's the most beautiful thing that will ever happen to you.